But there's another tip right there that comes to mind. A lot of times people will take and say, okay, my food's done. They lift the lid off, they set it aside, and they go to serving and digging it out. Then everybody goes and sits down and they enjoy their meal. What they forgot, those coals are still on the bottom. They're still working. And so what happens is they wind up burning food to the bottom of their oven. That becomes a problem. Then you have to take and scrub it and try and get it out and clean it all up. And I've got a friend of mine that has brought along his oven today that kind of had a similar situation. And so when he cleaned it all up, he noticed there was a little bit of rust down in the bottom. So we're going to show a little trick here. Pour some Gatorade in the bottom.
Yeah.
Okay, this is not the oven he brought me, but I show this as an example. This one is quite rusty, and when you pull the lid off, you look down inside there, boy, it's got a lot of rust in there. It's even flaking off and blowing around in the wind. Now, that one, we're going to put that in our electrolysis tank to clean that, but for today, we're just going to use this one that has light rust. You can see that it's not a big deal, not a whole lot in there. This is a fairly new oven, and that's not necessary right there. But what we're going to do is just going to take some kosher salt, something with some pretty good grain to it, and just pour it down in there. And then take you a potato, since they're pretty inexpensive, just grab a hold of that and start scrubbing. Grab you some different pieces of salt, and as you take and rub that around, you can see it's starting to take that rust off. It's not real aggressive. You could use a potato, you could use a sponge, you could use your hand, but it might scrape a knuckle or two. And last thing you want to do is be taking some skin out. But that potato's got a little bit of moisture in it, and it's going to kind of drip into that, absorb into that salt. Kind of make a nice little scrub there. Now, you want a bite? I'll take the other half and use it now. And you can see the salt starting to kind of change color as it's taking and absorbing that rust. Those particles in there changing color. So don't ever think that your rusty Dutch oven can't be salvaged. I've heard of cases where people have taken and their oven got a little rusty and they didn't think that it was any good, so they just pitched it in the garbage can. Boy, that just hurts my heart to hear that, because this stuff can be salvaged. There's some of the older Griswold and Wagner skillets, antiques that have been around for 150 years or so, 100 years or so, that very valuable. And I wish that some of these cast iron pieces could tell us the stories of where they've been and where they cooked and what meals they've cooked and for who, and what time periods. I know that my great-grandfather did some Dutch oven cooking all over Arizona. Lark Wilkins down in Safford and Thatcher area. Another relative that did a lot of Dutch oven cooking. And had a crew that they'd go out and do different events around their area for people just having fun with it. As you can see, we're not going to finish this all up right now, but as you can see, you wipe that salt out there. You can see that it's starting to clean that rust off. So once you get all done with that, shake your salt out, put it in some water, rinse it out, clean it up, Then you can go to seasoning it again. Okay, I got a little tip for you. What do you do with your ovens when you store them? Now, you hear people about they clean them and then they oil them down with a nice light coating of oil and then they put them away until next time. I'm here to tell you that in Arizona, it gets a little warm in the summertime. And out there in my garage, if I take an oven and oil it down and put it out there for a week, the next week when I pull it out, it's going to smell rancid. And so I'm going to give you a tip on how to prevent that. Now, what your goal in cooking is not only creating good food, but every time you cook is you're building to that patina, that hard surface that's building on there. As those oils and whatnot polymerize, don't ask me for the scientific explanation about that word, but as they carbonize and polymerize, then you start building that surface on there. It becomes a very slick, no stick surface. And so that's what we want to develop. And by putting oils on it, it just continues to build that surface until eventually all of a sudden you notice one day that, man, that's smooth as a baby's bottom. It's really good. So here in Arizona, to prevent having that rancid oven and preventing any rust, in some of your humid areas, this might work very well. As in addition, in July we get monsoon season. It gets very humid around here, but nothing like you might have in Chicago or Florida or Houston, some places like that. But here I have a clean pair, I emphasize a clean pair of tube socks. Now I only need one of those. And what you can do is you can take a fresh briquette, take about 1 or 2 or 3 of those and just shove them down inside a tube sock. And once you've cleaned out your Dutch oven and you're ready to put it away, lay that down inside the tube or down inside the Dutch oven and leave the neck hanging out somewhat. What that's going to do is that's going to create an air gap for air to circulate in and out. And those charcoal will wick away any moisture and help keeping that from having any rust or anything like that. Water is a definite enemy to cast iron. And so you might use water when you're making a soup or a stew or something like that. That's fine. When you're washing it, that's fine. But leaving any excess moisture in there is not good for the oven in the long term. So by adding that tube sock, 2 or 3 briquettes of charcoal down inside it fresh, it's going to absorb and wick away any of that moisture and help preserve your oven.